Hi everyone, welcome to Trail Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Shimmons. Thanks for coming back to our trail and ultra running show. This week, I've got an interview with spine race winner after 2 consecutive DNFs, Kim Collison, in a time of 82 hours. So we're going to dig into the race. I had a lot of questions submitted on Instagram. And also, I've got a lot of things that I want to ask him about too, because I spent a lot of time out there filming and seeing him and competitors throughout the days of the race, the 82 hours at the front of the race. So I'm excited to talk to him here in a few minutes. Kim has such a solid reputation in the UK scene. He has had multiple records across really arduous tasks like the Lakes 24-hour Munros, 24-hour Paddy Buckley round. These types of proper, rough, self-managed challenges. So really interesting guy. He also won the Swiss Peaks 360 race in the summer, so he can dice it in the Alps as well. But he's definitely right at the top of the tree in the UK scene. Before we get into the interview, I got to say, we got a new sponsor. So we got to thank Xmiles, xmiles.co.uk for coming on board as a sponsor for the Trail Talk podcast. Use the code IRunOverMountains for discount on your order. Link and everything down in the description, but just head over to xmiles.co.uk and use code IRunOverMountains for whatever nutrition you're going to buy, because they basically sell it all. If you want to support the show, that's how you do it. Anyway, I've done enough talking, but let's go and chat to Kim. Kim Collison, welcome to Trail Talk. How are you feeling after your big race last week?
Yeah, I'm feeling absolutely great. I mean, I've still got a massive smile on my face from the achievement that was glowing at the finish line, and I think it's still there now. And I feel a little bit more human as well after a week passed. Some of the aches and pains have gone. The feet are not as swollen, although they're still throbbing. And I was just saying, it was really nice to be able to hike up my local hill last night and just enjoy being in nature without the pressure of time being against me.
That's one thing that I noticed about you as I followed the race north. You always smile.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a distinct characteristic of me. I always like to smile. I think I've always smiled since a young kid. It's got me in trouble at times as well. Just what are you smiling at? Whack kind of issues. But yeah, it helped me to get through hardship. And if you keep smiling, it just changes your mindset. It helps you be more positive. I might be swimming inside or crying inside at times, but if I can smile, it just helps me get through those tough times that you face.
That's is one of those things that we hear, you know, if you laugh or smile or sing, which Lucy was doing, it can kind of spark more positivity inside. It's something also that I submitted, the question box on Instagram, and several people were asking, why is Kim always smiling? And also, what is behind this, behind the smile? Was there times in the race where you are grimacing inside but smiling on your face?
Well, the answer to that question is yes, definitely. I do hide behind the smile quite often, where I am grimacing. I'm in turmoil inside, thinking, how on earth am I going to get through with these miles? But still, at the same time, it's still a passion of mine, running long distance, pushing myself. It's still, I'm choosing to be here. Why aren't I going to try and enjoy it and put that smile on my face? However hard it is, it's still a choice. Lucy's motto, it's a choice to suffer, is kind of rings true. and so we choose to do this. It's hard, yes, but there's no point being miserable about it as well. You're there to have a good time and achieve things. So I always try and find that smile whenever possible. It might be a grimace at certain times.
Yeah, it's funny because all of the runners have their they had their kind of look or their expression from what I could see as I followed everyone, and you had the smile. Lucy was always positive as well. Every time after the road crossing at Marston, John Kelly was kind of you know, best way of putting it, like he was grunting and grimacing, and he was vocal in his pain, more and more as the days went on. But his legs kept moving. It was just sort of like from here up, and you know, so everyone has their way. And like if I think about myself, I don't think that I'm not coherent after, you know, when it gets towards 2 sort of days. And I don't know if I would even be able to bring myself to do the smile or, you know, to turn that around. So I think it's something that you've been doing for a long
Yeah, I think
time.
it's also something that helps me maintain focus and determination and that constant forward progress. You know, for like John, it's that grunting and you know, it coming out in a different way. But it's this is my kind of strategy of, right, I can maintain drive, motivation forward, rather than if I start to not smile and go down and start thinking too much, then I will slow down and lose that spirit and quickly spiral into negative thoughts, which at times have finished my races off. So finding my smile is also a way for me to keep that pedal on the metal, so to speak, in the best fashion that I can.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. The audience for this show is global kind of ultra trail fans of the sport sort of audience. It's about 30% UK and 30% American and rest of the world. So you're really well known in the UK scene. You've had the record or have the record in a lot of the iconic things that we would all know from being from here. But just for like the wider audience, maybe just let's spend a few minutes on how did you get into running and when did you find you had a talent for it and the desire to go and do things like the 24-hour lakes records and things like the spine. What was that? What's the abbreviated version of that trajectory for you?
I guess I learned I was good at cross country and longer distances as a child at school, that I was fairly successful and enjoyed that endurance side of things, which then developed into kind of a multi-sport background with my dad in sort of adventure racing. I did have a long period around university and travel, 5, 6, 7 years after my dad passed away, that I wasn't really training or running. But then in 2008, I settled back in the Lake District and just started training with the goal of big multi-day adventure races at that point. And then eventually I did several world championships in France, Ecuador, Costa Rica in that 2012 to 2014 period. I soon did a Bob Graham round in actually almost straight away in 2009 because my dad had done one. And then so I quickly got into the world of ultra and long distance running. But I guess I kind of always majored in running and fell racing, and was actually discovered that after a few years of pretty high volume training, that I was actually getting quite good in the English area, English champs sort of realm, with some top 10s and some top 5s. So kind of then focused on fell racing, but there's always that joy for the challenge, the journey, the long stuff. So you know, more and more I tipped into ultra races. I think my first 100 miler was UTMB back in 2015, 2014. I think
Yeah, I saw that.
I came 25th or something that year. Went off way too hard, as everyone does. Close to a top 10 at just past Cormier, and then had a long hard road to reach back to Chamonix. But yeah, there was always then a development of winning lots of like 100-mile, 50-mile local UK races. I had a little bit of success in the continent. I think I got perhaps a top 10 in a skyrunning European or skyrunning World Championships race one year. And then I did get my GB vest in Annecy in 2015. which was a real kind of highlight of where my speed in my endurance kind of matched to then represent Great Britain and help the team pick up a team bronze. But I guess with COVID, changes happened, but I loved the process. I loved running. I trained hard. I trained even harder, I guess, with the unknown. And then, so at that point, rounds became the opportunity. And for a few years, I'd helped a friend, Adam Perry, try to break the Lakeland 24-hour peaks record, which had stood for over 20 years. And it finally was like, well, maybe it's my turn to have a go at that. And just set off with no fear. I was probably at one of my peaks of fitness at that point. And with that no fear, I managed to break that record and notch up to 78 peaks, which, has only been equaled since by Andy Berry a couple of years ago. And that set a precedent of, well, what other rounds can I break? And it led to the Ramsey round, which has subsequently been taken by Finley, and the Lakes Monroe 24-hour record, which I still hold with 33 Monroes in a day. And so that was a really hot period for me. So that kind of led on to, well, what's next? What racing's back? What's going to challenge me and give me that sense of unknown adventure? And I listened to Sabrina Verjee on a podcast, like explaining how exciting the spine was. For years, I was like, well, why would anyone want to do anything that long, that cold, that dark? But yeah, I got to that stage in my career, point where actually I wanted to go back into that multi-day world. I didn't want to do it adventure racing, but spine fit the bill. So yeah, 4 years ago, I signed up for the spine race, and that kind of led me to the spine, really.
So we have to blame the pandemic for it.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you, as a runner, are you motivated by the competition, or is there like a really strong drive for competition that you want to go back until you've won something or till you've given your best?
Yeah, it's definitely competition does drive me. It is a drive to get the best out of myself, and often that is where the competition is strongest. So yeah, I've reached that point in the career where finishing things is not so important, but it's about finishing it the best I can, and I know I can. So that was always a decision making in how I raced the first spine. I went into that first spine with the confidence of breaking records on 24-hour rounds, and so I tackled it with that confidence, and was racing Damon Hall in those early first couple of years. But doing 24 hours is very different from doing 3 days at that sort of intensity. There was a whole kind of learning process to be had to be able to sustain it and get the best out of myself by the finish line. Although I knew I had it in me and I had the skill set, I just needed to work out what the problems were to do it.
In the last couple of years, I think there was an issue with medication a couple of years ago, and then was it last year you had a knee problem?
Yeah. So in terms of medication, I'm unfortunate to have familiar high cholesterol. So I have a faulty gene. So I had to try and control it with medication to improve my outcomes. But it's a balance between trying to do that versus still achieve sporting goals and that well-being that I get from achieving sporting goals. So post Monroe's record, I went on to a new medication to try and help support the medication I was already on, which seemed to be tolerated really okay. But finally, after a run of 2 years of a lot of DNFs, I finally going, maybe it is this medication that is causing the problems. And literally coming off it within weeks, I was showing adaptation in the strength room. I was then not having as much DOMs after just a regular training run on my local fell. The difference was kind of chalk and cheese, that, oh, this really has been blunting my performances and my training. And it's because I'm pushing the extremes of what's possible with eccentric contractions that finally there is a muscle breakdown that used to turn my legs into blocks of solid wood, like the sort you get when you've never run down a fell and you do a hard fell race for the first time and you've got this DOMS feeling for 2-3 days afterwards. I was kind of getting that mid-race, and it was just like, well, I just can't move forward. Right, that's the end of the race. Back to the drawing board. Yeah, last year I thought I'd solved all the problems. I was again top form, ready to race in that fantastic field of 10 elite guys all gunning for the victory. And fitness was there. I was at the game at the head of the race. I was in the lead. Leaving horse, building a gap, feeling strong in myself. Knee injury struck, and to a point I couldn't bend the leg. And then I knew that, well, it wasn't going to last another 120 miles over spine type terrain. So it's kind of an easy decision really to make that. No, I didn't want to suffer the consequences of not being able to run for however many months by walking it to the finish line. So although I was filled with hope that I was 99 or 95% of the way of solving the problems and being able to put that A game race together, I knew then I had to wait 350 days for that next opportunity. And it was a long wait to get to this spine.
Yeah, but that's interesting. Whenever I was looking through your previous race results, I saw the DNFs at U10B and things like that. Are they also related to the medicine?
Yeah, I think the last DNF at UTMB was kind of the tipping point. It was me holding my head in the hands, going, "What on earth is the problem?" And finally going, right, I've got to try this medication. This can only be the thing. Once you've ruled everything else out, the only thing that's left has to be the problem. And it was like, right, let's do it there. And I think that was the beginning of the change of the story. And post that, I started to then have a lot more successes again. It wasn't totally over, because over that 2 years, the head game had changed. The story in your head was allowing failure, allowing a DNF, that it had become too comfortable. So a lot of the work post this last failure at the spine race was about changing the story, rebuilding confidence that there isn't a problem anymore. It's solvable. Whatever problem comes up is now a solvable problem. Let's solve it, get to the finish. So that's what I made the goal of 2024 post spine, was whatever it is, whatever the problem, finish the race, win or lose. Don't allow it to be the story going forward, which really worked well. To fill with me confidence going into 2025.
That's fascinating. I kind of liken DNFs to, if you practice something enough, you get good at it. And if you've DNF'd once and then 2 consecutive, it starts to build up a pattern. And what you're saying there is you had to break that, no matter what. So you must have got a lot of confidence then in winning the Swiss Peaks 360 in the summer.
Yeah, that was kind of a culmination of that plan. The summer of building confidence is I've got to try and finish a 200 miler in the mountains to break the pattern, to know that I can finish and race a big 200 miler. I specifically chose Swiss Peak because it was slightly less competitive than, well, a lot less competitive than Tour de Gent, for example, so that I wouldn't put the competition factor onto myself and could take that away. Getting over the hump point, and for me, which is kind of between 24 hours and 48 in these races, and to find solutions to reach the finish, yeah, it was a huge confidence booster. Knowing that, right, I can do this. Now, then it led me into, right, now I just need to do the training block to get me to the best shape I can for pre-spine to race it the way I want to be able to try and race for the win, really.
You'd mentioned about adopting Damo's tactic of getting to the gate first. Like, maybe we could just expand out on what was the day one strategy for the race. You know, what was you had the confidence from the year leading into it and things, but what was the day one strategy, and how were you mentally breaking the race down into chunks?
Yeah, I guess I definitely chunked first part of the race down to Hebden Bridge being the most intense part of the race. People are fresh, we're strong, we're good ultra runners. We know how to run hard over a long distance, and that it was likely to be similar to last year in that sense. Although maybe not as deep, it was still a very deep field of experienced, strong 200-mile ultra runners. And I knew that John Kelly would be back for revenge and would be also going for the win. And previous experience tells me that he's going to go probably quite hard. And so I kind of decided that I would be going similar to the last 3 years and trying to stick with that pace. So that's what I decided to do. That I felt good. I was trained. I was confident. I could match John. And so off we went, and just really focused in on trying to fuel that work as well, trying to look after the basics while on there. So if I needed to stop for a wee, I stopped for a wee. If I needed to fill up my bottles, I stopped to fill the bottles at the opportunity. So trying to work pretty hard, but make sure that I'm looking after those basic things so that when the fatigue starts to kick in, I would still have that strength past that point. I guess after Hebden was a point where it was a case of hanging in there. John was still strong. He was trying to push the pedal still. And I was definitely having this is past my bedtime point. I'm feeling a bit weary here. And that early pace of fatigue was kicking in. And, the elastic was stretching over the training got harder. The snow got softer and deeper, and it was a lot more post-holing, trying to follow the footsteps that had gone ahead, but it was still not, there was no easy miles at that point. And there was a clear point where John decided to try and follow his trace, despite that everyone else hadn't followed the trace, and it ended up in making his own new fresh tracks. Me and Eugenie, just a minute later, we were back on him, and he was cursing in frustration at that movement, which kind of nullified any advantage that he had got. And at that point, things changed. My body started to wake up again, and I started to feel good. And so coming onto the flat area post a Gargrave across the fields, it was me that suddenly, I'm the one maybe putting the hammer on. And I started to get the John signs of he's feeling the sleep now. He's trying to shout to wake himself up. And it's that point where I'm just going to keep chipping along at what I feel's comfortable pace. And it's John that's then hanging on at the back of the train rather than vice versa. And then suddenly, where's John? He's obviously disappeared for his first of many trail naps. But it was left for me and Eugenie to, well, okay, now this race is panning out how I hoped for it. Because part of my plan to go hard was to be able to take more rest later in the race, to try and use some of that advantage that I'd gained for more sleep. And then the only left bit to do was to try and lose Eugenie. And I saw he was suffering up Malham Cove just on that steep steps. So I thought, okay, I'm stronger up the power hike steep stuff. So kind of waited till fountains fell before just trying to push a little bit harder. And then the elastic went. And so that was really kind of right. Now's the time to make some ground, make a gap. You're feeling good. This is a point last year that you felt good. And so I just used that to keep pushing, knowing that at Hawes, I had planned to stick to the plan, which was try to sleep. And so that got me into Hawes. But compared to last year, 2 hours slower, I felt so much more worked. We clearly had put a lot more energy into getting to Hawes than 2 years ago. That it felt, I'm quite weary. My legs are pretty battered from all that snow work. That it was definitely right. Yeah, I need to try something different. I failed 3 times between checkpoint 2 and 3. Let's do something different. Let's make sure if I fail again, that it's not having not tried to sleep early. So that's when I went upstairs, set an alarm for 90 minutes, gave myself space or the opportunity to sleep for 90 minutes. After 30 minutes of light snoozing, I went, okay, that's not happening. Let's get up and get back out the door, which I think was a good thing to do. Just gave me a mental break as much as a little break for the legs. And that helped shape the race for me. And it was only Eugenie that was in the checkpoint and no one else had come in when I was leaving. So that was always a big positive that the strategy had worked. I'd created space, used it for break, and knew that I was then still in the lead going out.
Whenever we think about sort of effort, I use RPE like a lot of people, and I guess you have to use RPE in something like the spine because a heart monitor, it's not going to last that long, and also maybe your watch is over the top of a coat or something. But how are you managing your effort? And in terms of like burning matches, when are you thinking I can afford to burn a match here, and how frequent does that type of thing happen?
Yeah, it's trying to gauge, because there's definitely times where in those early miles up the hills, I'm pushing into a zone 3 effort for me, into a moderate region, and then burning some of those matches in terms of muscle contractions and energy use. But at the same time, running downhill, I'm really quite economical and quite efficient, and that I definitely draw back on some of the matches over that type of terrain. That I kind of, I think, save some energy there, but it's definitely does then start to settle into, okay, this is my effort. This is what's capable. This is what I'm feeding. This is how I feel. I feel good at the moment. It's some points, okay, I've just got to hang, not do so much work, not be the one pushing. And then other times, the food kicks in a bit more, or you feel a bit fresh, you wake up and you just try and keep what feels like sustainable effort for a long time. And so there's always a element of it, feels a lot of it like a zone 2 top end point that feels like, yeah, this is sustainable for a long time. Sometimes you go above it, sometimes you have to pull back and just recover some of those matches. But it's definitely a fueling focus at that point. But then at a certain point in the race, it becomes much more a mechanical limiter for me. It feels like actually it's the legs, the muscular fatigue that is now limiting, and not the engine. That the heart rate drops really quite low, and whatever you do, you just can't get it up anymore because you just don't have the mobility or the contractions to push. So it becomes more a game of pain management and what can I stride out and force my legs to do rather than the engine anymore, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. There was a lovely moment just after Tan Hill when I was parked at the motorway or the A road overpass, and I was waiting for a couple of hours. I probably should have went to Tan Hill and got some food because I heard it was quite good there. But nonetheless, I was waiting at the side of the road, and there was a woman come down with a dog, and oh, who you waiting on? Oh, I'm waiting on Kim. And then after a couple of minutes, do you know Kim? And oh, I'm his mum. So I was standing there with your mum for it was over an hour. We were moving around and things, but then we watched your dot appear, and it was just a lovely moment to see you and your mum meet out on course. You were doing well, and how did it feel that moment for you?
Oh, it's a really uplifting moment just to see that proud mum, just to have that warm embrace. Just it was always a spirit lifter to see your mum, and hopefully to be this year was right. This year I'm going to make you proud, mum. I'm going to get up to the finish. It's always been a running joke. Why didn't you just slow down and finish? In not having that same competitive concept as I do of it, but that's just not important to me, mum. Just finishing. I've got to finish doing my best. So there was always that nice moment to, right, I've got the A66. This is it. This is the year, mum. And just getting that warm embrace, yeah, is always a good lift. And it helped carry me over the next few miles for sure.
We were just you're setting off out into the night and about to get to the point of a previous DNF as well, just after that next Moor section. What was that? First off, how long does that little buzz go with you? Because you got some food, probably in Tan Hill, then you saw your mum, then you were off into the night, and the next time I saw you was in the morning in Duff.
Yeah, I guess the reality of the bogs soon sunk in, and then the reality of this is hurting now. So that forward set in, and that terrain leading up to Tan Hill and Slateholme Moor, the bogs and the slush and the knee deep. I remember like the year before just skipping over those bogs on frozen turf and with a nice flow, thinking, wow, this is really, really good. This year, totally different. It was such energy soaking drain to make progress. And just from that A66, it's just a lot of rolling, boggy moorland that nothing that's really inspiring, but just so morale, energy sapping. And I did get a little pickup when I met Si, an MRT guy from Oldham, there was a little pop-up cafe with a farmer putting out flapjacks and coffee, and I met him there, had a coffee and a flapjack, and kind of I gave him a lift because he thought his race was over with a swollen ankle and a twisted ankle, and I was pretty at a low point there. So just he decided to come with me and upped his pace, and we just shared the rest of the miles over into Middleton, talking and sharing that space together, which made a huge difference because for me, Langton Beck has always been that little bit too far for a good sleep or a good rest. And that river path is so long, gradually up. You're really, really tired. You're in the middle of night 2, and it's taking its toll. My legs are starting to seize up again. It was like, oh no, yes, I've ticked off the final DNF point halfway up the river. I've got no injury issues. My legs are just battered all over. The pain's going through your head. The smile is definitely coming off me at this point. It's like, but just having that company to tow me in to the checkpoint really kind of, although it was feeling like the effort, I was still probably keeping up a really good pace considering. But falling into that checkpoint, it was a delight because I'd made it at last. But at the same time, I showed into a room where Eugenie was already out and had DNF. And I just sort of sat on the bunk doing a classic look at the bag, look into space. Like I had no purpose at all. It felt like the race had ended, despite my race position, and lost it all completely. So I did just decided, right, I just need to sleep. Tried to sleep. There was a bit of commotion with some medics coming in for Eugenie and a bit of noise, but I got a reasonable amount of sleep. My adductors were spasming, my glute medials were in agony, and I was like, a couple hours later, I got up thinking, my leg is still ruined. The sleep was supposed to sort this. And I just had that, how on earth? I was staring down the barrel of the fourth DNF thinking, how am I going to explain this a fourth time? I think, no, I can't do this. So I kind of went to the medic in the hope of a solution. I knew I needed to create space between my kind of emotional brain that was telling me that it was over, that the DNF was there, it was inevitable. Eventually, in that room, in those 2 minutes, I just got a couple of solutions that gave me hope. One of them was he filled up his Nalgene with warm water and said, well, you may as well try some rolling of your muscles with this to help. The other one was like, maybe you should try some electrolytes. And then I went, well, okay, I'll do that. And then I grab another hour's sleep, may as well. Because that's going to help. So I crammed in a load of electrolytes, went over the top on it. Wow, this might be the solution. Tried some rolling on the muscles and then snoozed and slept for another hour. And that was just enough that when I woke up, I was like, well, let's see. Quickly packed up, had purpose again. I had determination, and I didn't know how my legs were going to respond, but they felt a lot better than they had done an hour earlier. But during the kit check, I asked, well, has John gone out yet? No. Okay. I've just had 4 hours here, nearly quit the race, and I'm stepping out this door with a let's see attitude. Well, at least get over to Dufton, and then your mum can at least pick you up from Dufton. At least you've got further. But it turned out that actually, after a kilometre of walking down the track, crossing paths, having a little chat with Dave Phillips, Sam Skinner, and Tian coming in the other way, it was like, okay, I've just had a really good break, 4 hours. I'm good here. I'm moving. That's the start. If you're moving in this race, it's a positive. And as soon as I started on the diversion, walking up the path, I had a little red light flashing in front of me of a Challenger North guy. I just stuck my head on to, right, I'm into him, I'm going to catch him, and just started getting into a groove. And the legs were loose. I was into a power walk. I was fine. The brain had come back into gear. It was, I'm in this race again. The humps, I'm past the hump. And it was real significant point for me.
That's a good story. What do you make of like a home field advantage with this race? Because to give it some context, the community has really embraced John over the years, and it's an embrace that the community tends to give people that come over and experience the things that we do here and buy into it, so to speak. And they support John and, whoever else comes across. I met so many people that were there to see you, and I had a fry that morning in Dufton with a guy, Jim, I forget his surname, who was there to see you as well. And I met people like this along the way who were really rooting for Kim. I think he's going to do it this year. What did that mean, or how did you feel about that throughout the race? Because you must have seen all these faces.
Yeah, it kind of, I had a feeling of there was a willing of me to finish it this year at the start. I mean, everyone had followed my story for the last 3 years. Even last year, there was that hope that would be my year to finish it, to do it. So I knew that there was a collective will for me to reach the finish line. And that definitely developed as the race went along, as you came across more people who were really, really urging you on. You could sense it when you met them, that they were so happy that you were getting closer to the finish, that you were still in the lead, that it was going to be my year. But it wasn't until the end, really, when there was this outpouring of messages on the open tracking site and through social media, that I really realised how supportive the community were, how much they were willing on my dot in those dark hours. That it was kind of emotional afterwards, that kind of overwhelming, that the whole community, a large part of it, was as delighted as I was to see that dot finally reach Kurt Ghetto.
It didn't matter who people were rooting for. Fans of the race were all happy to see what you were achieving.
But going back to, I remember key points on the early first few hours of there was a lot of support for John. It was like, well done, John. And I remember quipping at one point, yeah, well done, Kim, too. But so there was a good well wish for John doing well at the race as well. That he is taken as one of our own, having lived in the UK for a couple of years and set the records on the Pennine Way and at the Wainwrights and doing the Grand Rounds, that he is really well supported and liked. So we definitely both had that well of support as we progressed up the course, but it definitely felt as it tipped that balance was pushing me onwards. And it was definitely trying to embrace that as well during it, to try and use that power to remember that all these people that are watching your dot, that they're cheering you on. And that definitely, in the dark moments, helped me push on and keep motivation.
There was a moment as you entered, or about to enter, the control point in Dufton, that or you were leaving Dufton, I should say, and John was just arriving, and you sort of exchanged see you out there, or good job type of things. And it was in that period of the race, it still felt like there was a race on. As the race progressed, and maybe just because of the front seat that I had, seeing John deteriorate throughout it, it felt like you were building that margin, you were holding like a comfortable gap. When did you feel that the elastic was broke, or at least stretched enough that you just had to maintain?
Probably Hornisted Farm was the point where I felt the elastic had just about napped, or was going. I think all along the wall, all the way from Dufton, it was kind of yo-yoing the distance between us. Sometimes John was on a charge, he was catching. Other times I was pulling away. Dave and Tian weren't too far behind in reality either, and nor was Lucy. And it was always, going along the wall, thinking I was having a real tough point there, having to have trail naps myself, thinking this is it. He's going to close me any minute now. I'm going to see him come over the next lump behind me. And I guess it wasn't until I came off the wall and started doing a John tactic of shouting at myself and telling myself to run down these hills harder, that I actually fed up, that I started to wake up, that I suddenly had this renewed determination that this was going to be my year. I'm not going to let them in now. And then suddenly getting to that oasis that is Hornisted Farm, where you suddenly come out of the darkness of the forestry and into this bright light of the farm lit up, and coming to see Helen, who'd waited up for me to meet me after watching my dot for 4 years, to finally go, this is Kim's, I've been not quite seeing each year. And then to see that actually John was 4 miles behind me at that point with a Z against his name, and Tian almost on him, that kind of went, well, it's only 5 miles to Bellingham here. They're 4 miles behind. There's a gap, a bit more of a, that's at least over an hour lead. And I guess from that point on, that gave me the conviction that I was starting to feel good. I was pushing on, just needed to keep doing what I was doing. But I guess it wasn't until perhaps Bryness that I discovered that gap had opened up to 8 miles, that I knew that the elastic that I had a race-winning lead, really.
Yeah, once you get to that point, you've got to be sort of smelling the barn, as they speak at that
But I
point.
guess at Bellingham, I made a decision that was, do I sleep here or not? You know, I'd gone in there with the intention, because I had such a rough night, to take an hour. But then I kind of assessed in the checkpoint that if I take an hour, that lets them back in the door. I've got to try. And I thought, it's 6 a.m. in the morning, 2 hours to daylight, natural body waking up time's coming. Let's just go for it. And hopefully, you know, what's going to happen night 4, hopefully I'm going to be close enough to the end to worry about that if it happens. So it was kind of, that was a real critical point for me to making that decision, push on. And yeah, suddenly I felt strong after climbing. Once the daylight came, my body woke up and I was able to really, really start pushing. And that really told in the gap that opened up. And I was feeling like, right, now I think that's probably when I got the first information on where I first asked, where's Jasmine's ghost? Was halfway up the climb out of Bellingham, that I thought, oh, she's 4 miles ahead. Can I close that? Let's try. I mean, it was a roller coaster. Let's try, because like 2 hours later, coming down the tracks into Bryness, I was like, oh my God, these tracks are like so tediously slow and hard and horrid. But yeah, you know, you start relatively, you know, the splits for that last leg. And by the time I got to Hut 1, 3 hours, ooh, definitely ahead of Jack's time here, thinking I must be closing men on Jasmine. You know, I left Hut 1. It was strange, because Hut 1, I had this point where I'm 8 miles in the lead still. The body started to shut down. It did the classic, oh, job's done now, isn't it? Let's close things down. So I was really quite miserable for half of the journey towards Hut 3. Just almost clicking those miles down, waiting for the finish. And then suddenly I had that euphoric moment as the sun starting to go down, thinking, you are going to do this. You waited 4 years for this. You're going to enjoy this moment. And just this flood of euphoria came, and I turned the pain down and went, right, I'm not going to be painful anymore. I'm going to run this. And literally started to run the uphills, started to push like it was early in the race. It was kind of, how am I doing this? It's 268 miles into the race and I'm running uphill. I just had in my brain that I feel good. I can run this in training. I can run this now. Yeah, when we say run, it was a running motion, and I'm definitely moving quicker than I would be if I was walking. But I was making suddenly quite rapid progress. Clearly I hiked steep terrain up the Cheviot, but on the Cheviot I went, right, that's it. I'm chasing. I'm running down. I'm running into TORQ Nutrition. This is going to be fun. I'm going to get. This is where it reverts back to my performance. I want to get the best out of myself on the day. It was like, I've got more. Let's use it. Let's give everything I've got. I don't want to have to come back again. Moment. And you're running into Hut 2, kind of asking the guy, do you know where Jasmine's ghost is? And just out of interest, he said, well, actually, she just left the hut. And it was that moment, it was like, yes, just the motivation I needed for the last 2 hours. On I go. Just motored all the way, really, from that point on, with the biggest grin of success, knowing that I would soon be touching that wall, all that I'd waited for.
You know, I was gutted at the end of the race, because I chose, rather than go to the finish to see you, I chose to go up towards Hut 2, and I had got, wasn't the sky amazing that night? It was such a beautiful evening, and it was about 5 miles out and back, because I was trying to like see the front of the race, get my run in, enjoy it as well. And whenever I pulled out my head torch, I only had one light on the pencil. So I don't have the head torch to be able to get up to Hut 2 or close to Hut 2. I was planning on meeting you on your way down from Hut 2. and then back to my car. And I don't want to be a liability or need rescuing in hills that I don't know. So I had to turn around, and I literally just got to the wall just after you'd finished. So I missed both important parts there for me, but it was maybe worth it for that sunset, which was amazing. Let's have a little chat about sleep.
Yes.
Did you go into the race thinking this is what I need to get through this, or was it more of a let's just play it by ear and do what I need to do?
I saw a different way at Swiss Peaks. I saw a different way to race it. For years, the strategy has been in the UK, or the culture has been, you got to do less sleep to get the quickest time. But it wasn't until he was racing Swiss Peaks and alongside some of the experts in the long game was it Victor Richard, who won the bigger race, the 660, of pretty much me and him coming into the checkpoint 2 middle of the first night and him saying, right, good place to sleep here. I'm going to take 90 minutes. And I'm like, it's first night, don't sleep first night. And we carry on. And so that's what I did. And he took his 90 minutes. By the middle of the next day, he's caught me. I'm like pounding around in the middle of the day trying to snooze for half hour. He's gone into the distance. By the time I get to my point where the next night 2, where I definitely need a sleep, he's already had his next 90 minutes sleep and is leaving the checkpoint as me and Sebastian Reichen have come into it. And it was like, and then forever on, it compounded for him putting in this really incredible time down on the longer race, which was just insanely like, whoa, you can do that with more sleep. So it was like, actually, this is a strategy that really works better for me, because I know that when I don't get enough sleep, I don't move very well. My mind goes down. The RP is rubbish, and I quit races. It was like, well, I've got to see if I can do something different with sleep in this race compared to what Jack has done, what Damon's done, what Jasmine's done, what Sabrina's done, which is trying to minimize the amount of sleep to 90 minutes. Jack had 52. It's all very much. And I'd seen over the years how Damon was really, really quick to say Alston, but from Alston to the finish, he was hours ahead of Jasmine's time, but always then seemed to end up behind her by the finish line, except for last year. But it was still the similar pattern, compared to what, Jack managed to do. It was incredible on what little sleep, and he managed to maintain his pace and all the way to the finish with 52 minutes, which was sensational. But I knew that wasn't going to work too well for me. So hence why I went, right, I'm going to try something different at a horse. I know it's too early to sleep. It's the wrong time, but I've got to try this strategy. And so that was always the intention. And then at the Langton Bet, it was, well, this is the place to sleep more. I didn't set an alarm. I didn't have that purpose, partly due to the physicality of where I was. But I knew I wanted to take longer there, to not, this was the place. If I was going to take sleep, to get some quality hours, because I knew that if I did, I had a better chance later in the race that it could unfold in my favour. And so it did in the end, which was great. That the plan had worked.
What was the total sleep time?
I think it was probably about 3.5 hours, roughly. Half hour at a horse. And then probably getting close to 3, maybe not quite, at Langton Bet, and then some trail naps on the wall for 5 minutes, 3 or 4 trail naps for 5-10 minutes. And so yeah, probably around 3.5 hours all told.
How do you manage to get off the sleep at certain points? Because my experience of it all is sometimes you put that much caffeine in your system that you're so kind of alert that you just lie there and it becomes just a waste of time. So how are you maybe blending the sleep with nutrition or caffeine? How's that kind of puzzle come together?
I definitely thought about this in terms of taking the last caffeine at Malham Field Centre about 6 hours before Hawes. That I knew I wanted the caffeine for that boost to get me to Hawes, because it was kind of a crux point of the race to make the strategy, but then didn't take any more after that, knowing that I wanted to try and sleep Hawes. Part of what I've also tried this year is to use some breathing techniques to try and down-regulate myself, to try and bring myself down into a state where I can sleep easier, to try and take some of that nervous energy of the race. I'm in a race out of it, to try and nullify that. So although I didn't completely switch off at Hawes into deep sleep, I definitely was in a lowered state of consciousness, that I was definitely woke up to check the alarm and not waiting. So, normally that would happen after 5-10 minutes of constantly clock checking. And that definitely played into my strategy of how do I sleep at this point in Hawes. I've got to try that. So I was trying some breathing techniques to down-regulate, to allow that calmness. Then by Langton, it's so far into the race for me and it's at that prime time for my mind wanted to switch off, but it was ready to sleep. It was interrupted because there was a lot of noises at times, but it was right. I'm awake and now I'm back asleep. Kind of moments, which was healthy, because then I just allowed what I naturally wanted. But my mind was also in that you're still in a race, so it didn't allow me like suddenly 6, 7, 8 hours I'm waking up going, oh my God, what's happened kind of moment. It was still, you're in this, there's still enough twinging, but it was enough of a time to know that I have had a good sleep, that my brain's feeling refreshed, that the body has started to benefit from that recovery. So it's trying to use a little bit of breathing that I think helps to smooth that transition over.
Without digging too far into that, I did see that you posted maybe yesterday about breathing, something to do with breathing. It's some sort of sponsor thing, but what are we talking about here? This sounds like it could be helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's trying to use some techniques that try and kind of slow your breathing down, and it's using varieties of breath holding to a degree and deep breathing and using your nose a lot more to try and bring in the nitric acid into your system a bit more, trying to allow that CO2 part that's in your breathing to help become comfortable with it, down regulate, to then tie that in with your thought processes of, it's basically a form of meditation.
Meditation, yeah.
To try and put you into a different mental state that eases you from I'm thinking about the race constantly to a bit more of a Zen state. So it's just trying to bring that breathing down into a calm, lower state, deeper breathing through your nose, using your full diaphragm, and just bringing calm into your world.
And that's something that you would do when you were I'm going to go for a sleep, I'm lying down, and then you're maybe doing like because you see some of these techniques, it's like in over 4, hold for 3, out over 5, this type of thing, isn't it? Is that what the type of thing that you mean?
For me, it's kind of breathing out through your nose, holding for 5 seconds, breathing back out through your nose, taking 2 breaths through your nose, repeating. And so you're just reducing the amount of breaths you have per minute and just building that CO2 up, which just helps, I found, to bring that state in easier. There is also another point in the races I find they're often running downhill or at different points. You make the breathing fit your cadence and you suddenly start breathing at a high intensity rate when actually it's really, really low intensity work. So actually bringing it back into your nose and focusing on nasal breathing and breathing in deeply and you're getting more oxygen, more CO2 out by just focusing on, actually, I can breathe through my nose and deeply, and I don't need to pant because I'm not going that hard. Calm it back down, and that just helps you bring in a calm focus again in some of those moments.
That's an interesting point, actually. I can totally relate to what you're saying. You can just increase your heart rate just by the anticipation, or, nothing to do with effort. It's just the anticipation of the effort, even in some senses.
The technical ability when you're running down thinking of long alpine descent, suddenly you can find yourself kind of not breathing properly because you're just so focused in on the technicality of it that suddenly you're holding your breath all the time or panting really fast, when actually it's not a hard effort. You're just going with gravity and you're absorbed in the technicality of it. But just by bringing it back and focusing in on your breathing, just suddenly you start to clear some of that lactic acid that you've been building up in your legs from holding your breath all the time running downhill. It can make a nice difference just practicing some of those techniques.
I will stick some information in the description of this episode about the breathing thing that you posted about on Instagram. If anyone is interested, they can go down there and look at that. A couple more things just to touch on before we start to wind things down. I really want to talk a little bit about nutrition and then on to gear, because everybody loves gear. I was getting lots of questions about what's that shoe Kim's wearing. But let's go on nutrition at the start. And I kind of want to start off with the supplement capsules that you're sponsored by. We've been having a conversation in the Trail Talk WhatsApp, a nutrition group, about these, and there's another person in there who's a nutritionalist and also has experience with this type of thing. But maybe you could explain what that capsule is. It Cura NZ or something? Yeah. Could you explain what it's about and what you were using it for, as well as the broader fueling strategy?
Yeah, I guess it's a lot of black currants from New Zealand packed into a capsule. So you got that because of the sun down there, the black currants full of anthocyanins. So it's packed full of, eating a load of black currants is really, really healthy. But now you put it into a capsule and concentrate it. It's supposed to have powerful benefits for the body in terms of, for me, I find it helps with my RPE. And if I take a really good concentrated dose, that I find that on sessions that I can push a bit harder, that I don't feel as much pain as perhaps I would do previously. It's always hard with a supplement to how much weight do I put on a supplement. And it's, in reality, it is going to be a marginal thing really compared to the majority of things that you do. But even if it is a marginal thing that helps me with an impact that I think I feel, then and it feels like there's some good science behind it. People always, it's not in the mainstream yet in terms of that, how convincing is that science. But as I say, if you have belief behind it and you feel that the power of that is doing you good. And for me, I've been taking it for quite a few years now as a daily supplement. And it seems to have helped my recovery. And as I say, in workouts now, taking a bigger dose before those workouts. I'm convinced that it has helped me maybe just improve my RP at different times. Whether it does or not, I think it's still to be debated. But for me,
50% of it, if it's placebo, there's already science that says placebo works anyway. So you're getting that benefit and potentially something else as well. So what about the wider kind of nutrition plan?
So for me, I really decided to split this into 3 distinct parts for a nutrition plan. For me, the first part was to Hebden Bridge, those first 8 to 9 hours, that, okay, I'm going to be burning a lot of carbohydrate in this section. We are going to be running a place where we're burning through the matches. So I really thought, right, I need to focus on a high carb strategy here and getting in carbohydrates to the highest level that I know my stomach will hopefully tolerate. I really focused in on probably averaging around 100 grams carbohydrate per hour. Some hours with perhaps 90, some other hours perhaps 110, and it just fluctuated depending on what I was feeling I could stomach in that particular hour and what makeup of products I had to be able to do that. And then from Hebden to Hawes, we're still into 100-mile territory. There's still a fairly high output that we're putting in, especially on that first part of that leg. So there was still a concentration on, I need to keep high carb levels in, not quite to the same level because I knew my stomach wouldn't tolerate it going into the night at that level. So I definitely brought it down to a more manageable level, but then started to introduce more fats into it, more real food, and different tastes and flavors. So a few more nuts, a bit of cheese for me. I remember having a cheese sandwich at Malham Field Centre because it felt like eating a proper meal, having a pot noodle at Loversdale. You're trying to get other things in now that fill the stomach, that so you're not feeling hungry, but still more of an emphasis on carbohydrate at this point than anything else. And then for me, after Hawes, it became into expedition territory fueling, that now the intensity level's low. I still needed to have carbs in, but at a much lower level. The stomach was going to be tolerating too much higher at that point. So it's still, yes, I've got to get a load in each hour, but not with the same focus and intensity as earlier on. But then definitely much more 50-50 into, right, I've got cravings for food. So nuts and sweetie mixes, chocolate, the savoury, salty nuts, cheese and chorizo mix, just to help with a bit of protein and that fat content. And then really focusing on the meals that you get as well at each checkpoint, making sure that you're having the lasagna or the stew or in double doses. And just trying to get that balance between, yes, I need food, I need fats, I need protein, but I also need sugar. So it became a much more balanced, in some way, nutrition strategy, but always with a focus of, got to keep the calories going in, got to keep the calories in to do the work. Without those, you're not going to feel well, you're not going to be able to keep awake, you're not going to be able to focus. And I think that made a real difference, that I don't really feel that I had a low point in terms of energy or food. I had low points because of pain and other issues, but I never felt particularly ill at any point, or that, I hadn't got the energy to carry on, or any sort of sugar crash low points where I need to sit down and get some sugar in quick moments. It felt like I really, really aced that plan for me. And then even at the end, it's like, right, intensity's lifting, right, cram in, there's more sugar. I need more sugar if I'm going to do this. I've got to keep that sugar back up. Right, what gels have I got left? Let's get them in. Now's the time to use them. And just thinking around intensity and strategies like that really helped me.
I mean, it says so much about how good of a race that you had, that you were still able to flip that switch at the end and go, I need some fast energy here, and able to take a couple of gels. So much we hear about, the longer these things go on, people can't even stomach the thought of even some sugars. So to be able to grab a gel is a great sign.
I think around this comes hydration. I've kind of worked out that I need fluid to be able to clear my stomach with the gastric emptying. So I was really focusing on making sure that I was hydrating as well, so that my stomach's clearing, so I'm not getting nausea from having a big well of sugar sitting in my stomach, not clearing it and building up. The problem with this race is it's super cold, that after a while, you're not sweating. You're just constantly then needing to urinate. And you end up drinking also a lot of coffee and a lot of plain water or juice at checkpoints. Yeah, I was still doing some electrolytes. I had some precision going in and some high five at times, and I was still eating some salty foods. But I think the lesson was actually I was verging towards hyponatremia by Langton-Beck. That I think that a lot of my muscle problems are probably linked to an element of maybe getting down that hyponatremic scale. That because I'm not, the duration is so long that I am drinking a lot to clear the stomach, that I wasn't, maybe getting quite enough electrolytes in to balance things up again. And that as the hours melt out, actually your body's suddenly trying to clear out the water from your body. And that, might mean that the muscles actually haven't got enough water. They're getting dehydrated to some degree in a bizarre sense. And it maybe not quite working as they should be. Yeah. Suddenly having that switch flicked at Langton-Beck to go, right, I'm going to be really on this now. Every drink had a precision tab or electrolytes in, that if I had other drinks, I was really going to really focus in on the salty nuts, making sure I'm getting the salty food products in as well. And I think that after Langton-Beck really made a difference to how I finished the race. That actually I had good enough legs to be able to do that point from 3 hours out, that I was able to go, actually, you have got muscles to do this now. I think that was down to that nutrition, but also getting the hydration element adapted better through the race.
That not having enough fluids to go with the high carbs is a mistake that people are making, and it's probably very easy.
I have made.
Pardon? Yeah, and it's probably really easy to do that as well in a cold race, because in those days, whenever I was out on course, I didn't carry any water. Like, I was not, okay, the effort was super slow and easy, but I was maybe just carrying a bottle with a filter on it. And then I realized that this ain't water that I'm going to want to filter around here. But just with the cold water or the cold air, you don't feel thirsty. But you were like nearly the opposite end of that scale. The need to go to the toilet would put me off drinking as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had to stop often to it felt like every 20 minutes. So I was needing to urinate, and you are thinking, am I drinking too much? But at the same time, I've got to get this food down. I've got to keep getting it clear my stomach, and because that's what's powering me to the end. So I just think you've got to get a real careful balance, and great understanding of warning signs of your body, and trying to make those adjustments without, because the hypertonia is a real problem and a real risk, that you push it, you get the carbs in, but suddenly you've got hypernatremia. It's really, really dangerous. So there is that hard thing to offset. So just having that awareness and knowledge to try and balance things in your strategy is crucial, I think, these long races.
There's so many takeaways in that section about hydration and things. So that's going to be very helpful to some people. Let's just touch on gear before we start to wrap it up. You started in the La Sportiva blizzards, and they're not as, for context, I think I own every La Sportiva shoe they've ever had since about 2015. And the blizzard's not one that I've ever had. And then you moved into the Mutant, which is the best long distance British mountain shoe of all time. There's never been a bad. I've never put on the Mutant and it not work well in a certain terrain if it's in the mountains. So talk a little bit about those shoes and anything else about the gear that was specific to this that you thought was useful.
I chose the blizzards because of the snowy conditions, that it was fairly good snow, quite hard. And I know they've got this little metal dob in them that just gives them that little bit of extra bite and grip, that, confidence on mixed terrain. If there's a bit of ice, a bit of snow, they're brilliant. They're not so good. There's a lot of rock and road and hard terrain. So I kind of assessed that actually to Hebden Bridge, it was a perfect shoe for me to wear for that leg, to just give me the, when I'm running downhill, I know I've got grip, I'm safe here, and that's what they did. So, but I also knew from wearing them the first year all the way to Hawes that they were just too much for that next leg. There was a lot of road, a lot of hard paving slabs that they would wreck my feet. So I made that conscious decision to, right, let's put the best shoe ever on. Let's put the Mutant on that are just really, really, really versatile to all conditions, that they had that bit more comfort, they have the grit, and they're really a robust shoe, which took me all the way to Langton. The problem is, at Langton, I took my shoes off. Usually had the room at like boiling point. It was so warm that my feet had swollen up in that time I'd been sleeping. So when I went to put the Mutants back on with the waterproof socks, they were feeling a little bit tight. I went, that's not going to be such good for my feet. If they're hot and they're tight in the shoe, they're going to rub all over, and that's going to cause massive blisters. So that's when I changed out to a full size up. I had the Sportiva Cyclone as a go-to size up shoe, and I put them on, and they went, yeah, they're big enough. They're comfy. They're not my ideal, although they've got the same sole package as the Mutant. They feel flatter. They don't feel as cushioned.
Yeah.
The Mutants in the sole design definitely feels, for someone with a flatter foot, feels they've got more cushion, but it was a case of that they've got more space in them. I'm not going to get blistered in these. Yeah, I'll tolerate the less cushioning feel. They still got a great grip. Still a brilliant shoe. They still hug the foot really well. So the positives were far outweighing on that shoe than the Mutant I had at that point in my drop bag.
So you had three shoes and multiple sock changes along the way, and did you have any other shoes available to you as
that was my three
options?
There is a space and weight limit, and so that was the ones I decided with a scale up of sizes to allow for some swelling of feet, if that was the case. Hopefully I'd planned to go all the way in the Mutants, but with the feet swelling and combo with the waterproof socks, I needed just that bigger size. So it was good to have that choice from previous long races, knowing that could be an option. Sock change at every checkpoint, dried the feet out, attended to any toe blisters, and then put new fresh socks on. And I think that was a vital part of the strategy, not rushing that at Hebden, making sure I did that. Previous years, I rushed through there, not changing shoes and socks, and regretted it. So this time I thought, no, let's take the time. It's worth it. Do that. I think foot care can make or change the last 50 miles of a race from being really, really miserable to being half miserable, which is a huge, huge, huge difference if your feet aren't in pieces and torn to shreds, and they're only throbbing because of being standing on them for so long.
One of the questions that was submitted on Instagram was in relation to John choosing the Prodigio Pro and you having the more classic Sportiva quiver of shoes. What was people were asking, does Kim have the Prodigio Pro? Was there a choice not to wear them, or what can you tell us around that?
I was most frustrated to see John in a pair of Prodigio Pro. Something like, this is the shoe I'm waiting for from the Sportiva that I've been waiting for years. The new Prodigios really feels good. It feels comfortable, but the trails have to be dry in the Lake District. And we know in the Lake District, they're not dry that often. But when they are dry and you run in them, they've got really great cushioning. And I've enjoyed a few really good runs in them. But with a 3mm grip, there's no way they were going to be good enough for the spine. I was thinking, yeah, those Protegio Pros, they look like the shoe for the spine. It's like, please, have you got any in time for the spine? And they're like, no, there's none coming in. But obviously, John got a ladies' colours version. I think he's also demo size. So he managed to get a pair of his size Protegio Pros for before the race. And I was like, eyeing them with most envy, thinking, yeah, that'd be really comfortable on those nice long track sections where you need a bit more bounce in your shoe. But hey, you deal with what's available at the time. And I look forward to wearing them in hopefully less than a month's time.
Yeah, and that's John's second pair of pros, because he had a pair before Tour de Jean whenever I saw him over in Cormier, but they were a half size off his size, but he still chose to wear them. And then when I saw him at the Spine, I thought, I think that's a different colour of shoe that you've got, but I wasn't for asking some mid-race. So you've also got that kind of feather to your hat that you won the race and beat those in the super shoes as well, right?
With a big rucksack. That's more importantly, you know, with a 30-litre rucksack that looked full. You know, that's also, I got plenty of comments to see someone with a big rucksack comments.
Well, that's what I was coming on to, because people are also very interested in pack weight, and there's such a variety in the gear that people can pack for this race, from the front to the back of the pack and the expense. And one of my takeaways from just experiencing the Spine was that the gear, you've got all of the training and all of the things that we have to plan for in these long efforts, but gear is more important in this race than any other race I think I've been around, just because of the elements as well. So tell us your pack weight and anything else about that.
I think the base weight was about 3.8 kilograms, not quite as light as John had got his base weight down to. But I was comfortable. I made some choices that I was happy with, like the actual bag I chose, because I find that really good for easy access to food and easy for stuffing things in. And I tried a really small bag 4 years ago and thought, actually, no, the downside of this is it all flies out when you just undo it, and it's, you know, not as easy. So yeah, so relatively quite light compared to a lot of people's packs. But at different stages, probably had 1.5 kilos of food at the start of some of the legs, half a litre of water. You know, you're adding a couple of kilos onto that at different times. Sometimes taking an extra jacket or extra pair of gloves, or, you know, things that on top of that mandatory kit list, you think, actually, this leg, the weather's a bit dicey, let's take an extra jacket in just in case I do get cold. I have a tendency, I've still got a mountain leader in me that skews me to the safer side of things than bare minimum. Yeah, the kit list is also a bugbear of mine as well as John's. I may not have been as vocal on it, but yeah, it needs a decent kit list for safety reasons. You are in exposed territory in the worst conditions in the UK faces in winter. You have to have some form of safety net if you twist or break your ankle and you need to stay still until help gets to you. But in reality, it's still the UK. Support is never more than a few hours away from you, reality. There's items on the kit list that are nice to have in an emergency. They're not a thing that necessarily is going to keep you alive for the space of time that support would get to you. So sleep kit, bivy bag, yes, essential, life-saving in that emergency on top of crossfell in a blizzard. I want to be in that kit if I'm going to get cold pretty quickly. Am I going to make a cup of tea in that moment? No, I'm not. If I've got it, it's nice to have, isn't it? A comfort thing that's going to make you feel good if you can get a bit of a hot drink. But it's an unnecessary expense and thing to carry. So there's items on the kit list that should be maybe recommended to carry. This will make your experience thing. There should be, okay, this is definitely mandatory, but we need to be treated more like adults with it, the kit list. It speaks to you as you don't know enough, you're not experienced enough. When you're spoken to like that and given that, you don't then think about it for yourself as a responsible adult. Actually, this weather's really bad. I need to put this jacket in and not the lightest jacket. I need to, actually, the forecast is really, really sunny on this leg. It's going to be quite nice. I can carry my light waterproof jacket. I don't have to have my big, it doesn't encourage you to think and have some choices. I just think there's room for improvement in the kit list, because every extra item you put on there is an unnecessary cost that someone's got to pay out in a very exclusive race because of kit. I think, yeah, it needs to be thought about a little bit to improve that. Yeah, definitely safety needs to be thought about, but also how far do you need to go into the details? What is actually necessary? And I think that's what John tries to explain in his post. He's not against kit or carrying it or safety stuff of it. It's just actually, why isn't there a wider discussion to get a better consensus that people agree on, rather than have to put up with because they've entered the race?
Yeah, I think that's a point well made. If you compare that style of kit management from the organizer perspective, and then compare it to some of the largest European races, I feel like the European style has a little bit more of, don't be stupid. You know that you should do this. There is a mandatory and a recommended, whereas that's not. We don't leave some of those things up to people's better judgment here sometimes.
There's also an element of, you've got to have it in your kit bag. We can change, before you leave a checkpoint, you must have that item with you. There's room to maneuver within the race itself as well, with a lot of them, to adjust to the conditions and you to go, I think Tour de Jean, there was a point in the race where it did snow, and those that had thought ahead decided to take their crampons or microspikes could carry on in the race past this refuge. But anyone that had decided not to was deemed, oh, that's not safe enough for you to carry on. So that was the end of their race. And that's an element of allowing people to have personal responsibility, but also having a safety cut-off point where actually, no, we deem this is not safe for you without that piece of kit. You've got to take the responsibility that you didn't bring it up to here. So race over. I think that there is a better balance to be had in this race.
Yeah, I agree. And right, we're well into the podcast, so let's wrap it up with couple of closing questions. In terms of recovery and post event like this, is there anything that you typically would suffer from? I personally, I'll throw one out there to get us started. I always get night sweats for about at least a fortnight. Not every night, but going to bed and putting the towel down before I get into bed. Do you experience any of these quirks and things?
I definitely had 1 or 2 nights of night sweats. The worst thing I get is actually my feet just really, really balloon up. They really, really swollen. But yeah, you can touch it and it turns white, kind of like, oh, yes, that's not so pleasant. So that is probably the worst acute phase of recovery for me. And then just that persistent ache in the knees and the hips, in the joints, that just takes a long time. And then that just, and then also you're up and down to the toilet every few hours in those first few nights that interrupts the sleep. That is quite a challenge.
Well, you were used to going to the loo every 20 minutes during the race. The body has to readjust.
Once you finally want to stop and sleep, it's like pretty annoying.
And are there any sort of go-to strategies that you have for coping with these things?
Yeah, try and eat lots, try and just rest. I think it's just a bit of patience. Start taking my multivitamins, my currents capsules, just eating some healthy greens again, taking a little bit of turmeric, anything that might reduce inflammation a little bit. And yeah, just give it time. I think it's the key thing. Patience, and you've just done a really big thing. Give your body a chance. And then always number one thing is focus on sleep when you can sleep. Make sure you get it. That's the only thing that's really going to start to rebalance your body.
So with such a big effort in the first month of the year, what does the rest of the year look like for you?
I guess so. We'll be hopefully trying to get into TORQ now and get that for September time. There's a real go, okay, I've had a good couple of learning lessons now. Can I take this to the continent and race well on the TORQ route? It's also another race that I had one of those DNFs in that couple of year period with the muscles. I remember, coming out Donis halfway through going, oh my God, my legs are like this again. Oh no, it's over again. So I've definitely got to close the book on TORQ, and hopefully with all the extra learning, I should be hopefully be able to race it pretty well. And it excites me because it's a really competitive 200-mile race, probably the most competitive of the 200s. So that excites me. In the meantime, I'm going to have a sprint round UTS 100 kilometer, chasing some of the youngsters like Josh Wade and some of the faster trail runners that are coming across. So that'll be a fun, hard. Then I'm excited to go to Bighorn 100 in the States. Never raced in America. Let's thought, right, let's go do a 100 miler there. It's got similar elevation profile to Lake 100. I had a pretty good Lake 100 this year. So, it just felt like, and it was a hard rock qualifier. I thought, time to start collecting qualifiers for hard rock and putting in the long journey to try and get into that classic race that appeals.
Don't talk to me about hard rock qualifiers. That is what I have to find this year as well.
I think that's why I went to Corn. I didn't think I could rely on TORQ finish because it's so like, in jeopardy, or has been with 200 milers. So I thought, all right, find a 100 miler that you can finish, get the qualifier, and at least give yourself a chance to be in the lottery.
Well, the good way of getting an easier hard rock qualifier? Go to America, because we have the hardest ones here. It's a similar sort of predicament for me, in the sense that the only period that suits me to do a qualifier is September on. So I've got either TORQ or Lake Biwa 100 in Japan. So I don't feel like I want to do Tour, to be fair. But I kind of do want to do it, but I only want to do something if I can put in the right time. And I'll only be in the Alps from the start of August, and probably want to do the summer there to just prepare the legs for the downhill, basically. Final question for you, Kim, before I'll let you go. And thanks so much for your time. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. Favorite La Sportiva shoe of all time?
Has to be Mutant. Yeah, definitely.
Simple as that. I thought that was going to be the answer. That's what I would say as well.
I've gone around different shoes at different things, thinking that they're better than like the Ciclone. I fell in love with for a while, but it all came back to the Mutant being actually this is the shoe that fits my feet. It's versatile. It does the job on multiple terrain, and so at the moment it's Mutant.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, great time to finish it off.
No
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for talking to me.